So, again, we talked at the beginning of this show about how if Charles wins, there's a very good chance that he cements himself as the greatest lightweight of all time. Very good argument for that, especially if he can get a finish over Islam Makhachev, right? The problem is that Islam is very competent on the feet. I don't know that he's quite the risk taker that Oliveira is, right? Like, I don't know how willing he's going to be to go into those firefights, but he's more, I think in this fight, he's going to more look to control things on the ground. And there's an argument, I think, that could be made that the most similar fighter that Charles Oliveira has faced, if you look at just stylistic comparisons, Kevin Lee might be the most similar to Islam Makhachev. I'm not saying that they're totally similar. I'm just saying in terms of like their stance and the way that like, I know it's different, right? Like I'm just saying in terms of their skill set and the wrestling, like that you see from Kevin Lee and Kevin Lee's ability to get top position on Oliveira, I think there are similarities there. The difference though is that I think Islam is better everywhere. I think he's more technically sound in the striking department. I mean, that fucking head kick that Kevin Lee hit on Gregor Gillespie was unreal. But I think that Islam maybe doesn't have that sort of knockout power, but he does have all of the tools to keep himself safe defensively and to put pressure on people and strike with them offensively, right? So I think that he's a little bit better technically in that regard than Kevin Lee is, right? So and if you look at how some of the scrambles that Kevin Lee, now granted Kevin Lee can scramble too, like that's kind of like a good style for him, whereas Islam is more control based. So it's gonna, if you look at though, like Kevin Lee was able to establish top positioning sometimes and stay on top of Oliveira. I mean, ultimately he got finished, right? But he was able to get on top and do some things there and control Charles. The problem though is that Islam is so good at controlling the fight on the ground, like so good at controlling those positions. And I think he's much more impressive than Kevin Lee was at maintaining that control, right? The question is going to be though, I think when they get to the ground, this is what it boils down to. Can Oliveira force constant scrambles? What does Islam look like when he has to scramble in positions? That's a real element of sports and like sport, like wrestling. And like, it's not, I think it's not given enough credit, but what happens, because one thing that Oliveira does really well is he wrestles with his legs. What happens when Islam Makhachev starts getting on top, right? And what happens when Oliveira starts getting into these fucking Ashigarami situations and stuff, or trying to sweep and constantly using his legs to wrestle with Islam and forcing situations that Islam probably isn't used to dealing with, right? That's the fucking question. I think though, oh my God, I've gone back and forth on this. When I was sitting upstairs, like I said, right before this podcast, I was leaning with Islam. But now that I'm thinking about it, and when I think about that, because I was just thinking Islam is going to be able to get the fight to the ground and hold Charles there, right? And that could be a very real possibility. He might negate some of the things that Charles is able to do. And over time, when you're not able to successfully submit somebody, that can weigh on you. And also another thing to consider in this fight, guys, is that if Islam is able to just keep getting on top, even if he has to go for the takedown over and over, most of Charles Oliveira's submissions are like rear naked chokes, right? Anacondas. He has some guillotines in there. But a lot of your success is still going to come from the top position or getting to your opponent's back. So it's like, I just still don't think it's a good idea to be the one who's not the better wrestler in this matchup. So it's like, I want to lean towards like Islam almost. And like, I think that's, if I'm being honest with myself about the stylistic matchup, I think that's how it goes. But if Oliveira, because I think that when Islam gets there, the reality of the wrestling and pressure is like, I feel like both of these guys have never faced one like the other before. Like when Oliveira, I think that this fight will end up on the ground, but like when it gets there, it'll probably be Islam Makhachev who's initiating it. And when he gets there, I just feel like he's going to be able to like control things so much better than Kevin Lee did, and he's going to stay out of those scrambling positions. But if he's not able to, and Oliveira can constantly manipulate his base and make it move around, this could start leaning towards Oliveira. And another thing to consider is that I think Oliveira is cleaner and faster on the feet. Like, I know that Islam, like we said, he was very technically sound. I just think, though, that, like, I'm flip-flopping as I make this pick. I think I'm going with Oliveira, man. I think I'm putting money on him at the odds that he's at. I love how much like top tier competition he's faced over the years. I love the win streak that he's on right now. I love the confidence that he's exuding. I just think he fucking gets it done somehow. I think he is, like I said, I think his striking is a little bit cleaner. He's willing to put himself in the fire a little bit more. I think he could crack Islam in situations like that. And what happens if he hits some fucking like judo throw or something and gets on top of Islam Makhachev and you have to see Islam work his way up from his back? What does all that look like, right? I can see this fight going either way, but in terms of how I'm laying my money down, I think I'm going with Oliveira, man. I do think that he's going to be able to like leg wrestle and stuff from the bottom position, and even if he can't get a sub from there, get back to his feet or force scrambles that put Makhachev in situations that he hasn't dealt with yet. And you also have to realize the magnitude of the stage, right? Oliveira has done this over and over again now against top-tier competition, and this is really the first time that Makhachev is truly stepping into the spotlight. This is a pay-per-view main event against one of the baddest motherfuckers in the world who has a hit list for a resume. So I think that Oliveira gets it done, man. I'm leaning on his title defending experience. I'm leaning on his experience in these big moments, his ability to wrestle with the legs from the bottom position and make the positions hard for Islam to control. But yeah, I'm going with Oliveira. I think he gets the finish somehow too. Maybe TKO if he can keep it on the feet. I don't know. Now that I'm like I said, I've gone back and forth, and I won't be surprised if Islam wins. I think that Islam does have like a style that you never know until it plays out. That's the thing, right? But I think that Islam could potentially get the fight to the ground and just kind of wear on Oliveira. Like I said, if you look at some of the things that Kevin Lee struggled with the control, I think Islam could do better in those situations and keep the fight there. And then it kind of gets drawn out and it makes it harder and harder for Oliveira to hit submissions as his energy starts to fade over the course of the fight. But if Oliveira can make things difficult early on, we got a chance. So that's it, guys, though. That's